Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning and welcome back to Modern Leadership. So good to be with you today. Let me start with a question. Have you noticed this trend? People are working more, longer days, earlier mornings. It's not new. We've seen this trend for at least 30 years, probably closer to 40. When we go to network events or connect with friends, what's the first thing people say? I'm so busy. I'm working so much. I'm slammed. You know what? I'm often guilty of this as well. But does it have to be that way? Today's guest says no. He takes the underpaid, the overworked, and he helps them free up time, focus their offer, and find their most fabulous clients. He helps them unhustle. So let me introduce Phil Newton. Phil is the owner of an investment company who knows what it means to work himself to death and why it is important to work smarter and enjoy life. He used to work 14 plus hours a day until he discovered a predictable process to find, filter, and sort new clients. His mission, to spread the idea of unhustle, which is the art of doing less while earning more. Phil, it's so great to have you with us today. How are you?
Jake, it's fabulous to be here. Absolutely fabulous. I was kind of intrigued as to who this person was when you were describing it. But yeah, it's very pleasurable to be here.
Well, it's intentional, right? I mean, you started out, you were in this same hustle mindset that I just mentioned, this 14 plus hours a day. But then there was this mindset shift. And take us back there. What happened that said, hey, you know what? It doesn't have to be this way.
Well, I can give you the sub-story version. The sub-story version is a priest was standing over me and was offering me the last rites. And that was the pivotal moment to me thinking, perhaps I need to change.
Yeah, that's a wake up.
So that'll do it for you. It's a very dramatic extreme to where I would. In my situation, I was on and off ill for many years. It turned out that I was eventually diagnosed with Crohn's disease. But like most people, Jake, I bought into that. If you work hard, and usually that translates into exchange time for money, work long hard hours, and you'll get good at something maybe, and you'll be rewarded for it. And that's what we're kind of sold. Literally from day one, work, do it hard. Do it harder, faster, better. You buy into that, and for me, it literally put me on my deathbed. So. I know that's a dramatic extreme, but just to try and make it relatable, everyone's got that kind of situation. If you find yourself kind of asking, I want more, I want something different, because these are all the things that were going through my mind before, that nasty experience. And it was just asking, I want something more. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a different way. All those kind of questions run through your mind before anything serious happens, because you start looking for something and you might not know what you're looking for, but you know that you've not got what you want, and you're just in that pursuit of looking for something. So that's where I was kind of before the kind of the major catastrophe. So maybe that helps someone just figure out their own situation without having to have that life-changing experience that I had.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that there's a lot of listeners to this podcast, including the host here, that is saying, we've seen this. And maybe to a certain degree, we've bought into it a little bit that, if we're the first one in the morning, if we're the last one out in the afternoon or in the evening, that we can get more done, that we can be more productive, that we can, actually propel our careers forward. And one of the things that you talk about is, it's not about working harder. It's not about working more, but working smarter. And, closely related to that is this 9-step framework that you talk about. Now, this is how to really walk through sales without being high pressure. And I think a lot of us listening here, we understand that sales is a major important part of our lives. It's a major important part of our businesses. But this high pressure thing is causing us to work harder, to work longer, to work more stressful. And so I want to walk through this a little bit with you.
Before we kind of dig into that, maybe it's worth just reframing the sale, because everything we do is a negotiation. And I think when you have that perspective, you want to go somewhere, but maybe the missus doesn't. And, you've got to kind of convince her, come on, it'll be fun, it'll be exciting, And if you think about the way that you convince a loved one to join you in doing something that they weren't perhaps happy with, then a sales conversation is just you trying to figure out, can they join you on your journey, or can you help them with their journey? And that's what we do in our personal life to kind of figure out, are we going to do something together, And I think if you frame that sale, are we going to do something together? Have that mindset before you go in to make the sale. Because I don't believe that making the sale is the objective. Maybe for some people, it's helping them make the decision to not make the sale. And that's a part of what this framework will help you do. It's a way to have a conversation. And if it makes sense to have a longer conversation, then you might progress to making the actual sale. But maybe it's a short conversation that helps someone make a firm decision as to, this isn't right for me. And that should be an okay objective as well, because that's what we do in the real life. We're trying to help someone make a decision. And that's what this framework helps us to do. Sorry, that's just how I view the bit before the actual conversation.
Well, and there's a couple of things in there that are really, I think, important to notice and really important to talk about. One is you started with this framework of, looking at somebody that you actually have a good, strong relationship with, that it's not a controlling or a tricking relationship. It's not, I'm trying to
manipulate is a word that it should not be in anyone's vocabulary when it comes to any sort of sale in my book.
Yeah. So as we start with this idea of like focusing on how we would act and react, discuss and build this relationship with somebody that we know, like, and trust, somebody that maybe that's very personally connected to us, it helps us to develop a framework that can be used when we're dealing with strangers or people who aren't as closely related to us. So I think that's the first thing that really jumped out to me. The second thing is this idea that the sell isn't always about getting them to purchase your product or to buy your service or to work with you. Sometimes it's helping them understand that this isn't a good fit. And most people wouldn't say that. I mean, Phil, this is very unique for you to talk about. So tell me a little bit about that aspect.
I think most people wouldn't. I think the phrase that comes to my mind is flogging a dead horse. Have you ever heard of that phrase?
Yes. Yeah.
But that's what you're doing when you're trying to convince someone that they don't want to do the action that you're trying to convince them to do. It's a no. They've just not said no. And you'll hear that in the way that they reply, the way that they respond. And you're going to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, long meetings. You're going to do the callbacks that you're supposed to do. And you're going to keep flogging that dead horse. The horse is dead. It's not going to take you anywhere. And I think if you can recognize that it's not a good fit, I think that's a good thing and help someone to make a decision, whether that's a buying decision or a non-buying decision. And I think there's more than one way than putting cash in the register to making a sale. Because maybe it's not a sale today, but maybe it's a sale in 6 months. Maybe it's not a no, it's just not yet. But you're trying to get the sale today. And recognizing that is probably more important than making the sale, and having different ways that you can make the sale rather than just putting cash in the register, as it were. So having different ways to get a desired outcome for you. One of those is making the sale. One of those is not making the sale. And you're not going to be spending hours, weeks, maybe months chasing and following up. Maybe you leave it on a high note, and maybe this person's going to be a good referral partner as opposed to a sale. Maybe they've got a network that you can tap into. So another way that you can make the sale is generally building a rapport and a relationship with that person to figure out, okay, well, what's the best situation for them, and what's the best situational outcome for me. Maybe actually doing physical handshake business isn't the right thing for both of you, but maybe you've got a new ally that can spread the word about how good you are at the thing that you do, and you've got a referral upon it. Maybe but for me, that might be more valuable than making the sale, because if they refer 3, 4, 5 people that turn into yes, let's do business type of conversations, then that's going to be more valuable asset than trying to flog that dead horse. So having that different objective and having a conversation with people first and building that relationship is going to help you figure out, okay, well, which is the best avenue to pursue here. Does that make sense, Jake? It's just really important for me to figure that out first.
Yeah, and not only what you're saying, but if you don't bring on fabulous clients, I mean, if you are able to manipulate or cajole somebody into doing business with you, this is the person that you're going to have to chase for payment. You're going to have to chase for productivity. You're going to have to chase for whatever it may be. And it's just going to be a stress on both of you. So I couldn't agree more. I think you're absolutely right that there is a right client and there's a right opportunity, and not all sales needs to result in cash in the cash register. So, and actually, this really starts us off with this perfect sales strategy, Phil. The first step is this build rapport. Second step then is an agenda. So let's talk through a little bit this perfect sales strategy. We started out with building rapport, understanding that, there could be business, there could not be, but building that relationship could take us to the next level. Let's go to the next step, agenda.
Well, I think just setting the tone of the conversation. For me, what I like to do with setting an agenda, I mean, you can build the rapport like before you get on the phone call as well with the way that you talk to people. I just want to kind of backstep to that a moment because that sets the tone for everything else. I'm a little bit kooky, a little bit quirky. I'm a talker. So be yourself. I like to say ahoy there and, hi there, you flap old salty sea dog amigo. I'm a little bit weird. I will say that to people because it's like an icebreaker and it just kind of lets you know that you're a real person and just be a little bit weird. Just be your kooky self. I think that is a part of that rapport building as well, because people buy people. Again, another cliche phrase, but it's so true. It's not necessarily business to consumer or business to business. It's people. So if you can be relatable quickly and be a little bit weird, be a little bit different, just be yourself, then what I normally bridge onto with an agenda is, again, to try and break down the barriers, because we know this is a sales call conversation, that's why you're on the phone, but you want to kind of break down the barriers and help set the agenda. And the way that I like to typically do that is say, hey, look, I don't know if I can or I can't help you until we have a conversation. I need to ask you questions, and if you're okay with that, can we carry on? And you're asking permission to ask them questions. You're involving them in the conversation. And, whether we do business together or not, we can figure that out later on. But before then, let's see if we can do something together. And then you have that conversation. And it's just a quick set the agenda. Maybe I've got like this podcast, we've got 45 minutes to have a little bit of a conversation about the thing that you do, Phil. And, at the end of it, we'll figure out, where we go next. That is how I set the agenda. And you can do that in lots of different ways, but I like to be kind of loose. I've got 30 minutes blocked off for you, and I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay with you? There's the first question. You're asking their permission to be involved in a conversation, as opposed to, I'm going to try and sell you this thing that I've got, whether you want it or not. And I'm not going to let you get off the phone until you've given me a yes decision and you've got the checkbook out and the invoices are out, because that's how most sales conversations go. Most people dread them. And I think if you're on not necessarily the receiving end of that, if that doesn't sit well with your personality, and for most people, trying to sell somebody to something, again, the hard sale approach, it doesn't sit well with most people.
Yeah, they put up their walls, they put up their defenses, and they don't want to engage.
It's weird for both people is what I'm trying to say, for both sides. But sales managers might decide, you've got to sell. But if you just set the agenda and say, hey, look, we've got stuff that you can buy, but let's figure out if they're the right thing for you. Would that be a better conversation? And most people are open to that. And then you can almost hear, and sometimes actually hear, a sigh of relief. Oh, this guy's not going to try and hard pressure me into something that I wasn't sure about or maybe don't know enough about to make a decision. So you have that setting the tone, set the agenda, and you're asking their permission if they can go on with that. And if, and that's their opportunity to say, what, I've done a little bit of research. I don't think it's the right time for us. Or, because however they've got on the phone with you, it might be, it's not right time, maybe it's next month, a next 6 month thing, or maybe, we don't want this product anymore. Maybe they've changed their direction that they want to go in, and what the thing that you do isn't right for them anymore. Whereas last week when they made the booking, as it were, to speak to you, it was the right thing. Things change, and that's the opportunity for them to hit the eject button.
And with technology nowadays, things are changing so quickly. And so, okay, we've got agenda. We move on to the next step, and that is why me, why now? And this is, us now going through these questions of, why should they work with us, or why should they purchase our product, and why is now the right time? So tell me about this third step, perfect strategy. Why me, why now?
What we're trying to do with the next, let me just kind of overview the next couple of steps so it explains this step. What we're trying to figure out is what the current situation is, what their future desired situation will be, and we're trying to ask questions that will bridge the gap. Again, probably for anyone who's done sales for any length of time, that's no surprise. But up to the agenda points, they've maybe a little bit nervous. If they then want to continue, then we're going to be saying, okay, well, what's the current situation? Where are you now? What is the problem? That's what we're trying to identify by asking, why are we on the phone right now? And you're trying to figure out what's that, because it might be that they're getting pressure from their manager, or if they're the owner, they've got this situational problem that they need fixing. You said, well, and you really just are trying to figure out, well, what is the problem? And not just the service level problem. What's the problem below that? And what's that leading onto? So we're trying to figure out, well, what's the situation? Why did you get in touch with me today? Basically, point on the doll. Where does it hurt? That's what we're trying to figure out for their business. Where did the bad man touch you type of thing? That's what we're trying to figure out.
So that ties in like the next 4 steps, right? So 3 being why me, why now, 4 being results. What are they looking for? Where do they want to be? What's the journey that they're on? Number 5 is reality. Let's take a real look at where we are today and what it's going to take. I mean, realistically speaking, what it's going to take to get us to that result that we just talked about. And then number 5 is to find that pain. Figure out the obstacle, the challenge, the pain point. What's holding them back, keeping them from getting to where they want to get. And so as you talk, that kind of encompasses that whole process of going from, look, this is who I am. This is what I can do. This is who you are. This is where you want to get. This is the process that will get you there. Does it make sense for us to work together to travel this journey together? Or are there other options for you to reach the result or execute the vision that you had in mind?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we're also trying to do is while we're trying to kind of figure out what the logical problems are, the situation, we're also trying to figure out, okay, well, what does the future look like for them? If we could wave a magic wand and fix not necessarily all of their problems, but this one thing that's really bothered them right now, which is why you're on the phone with them. If we could wave a magic wand and make that go away, what does that future look like without the current problem? And now that when you do that, you get someone who's now emotionally engaged in the conversation with you. And by doing that, you're trying to demonstrate empathy and you're trying to understand their situation, not just the problem, but like the experience of the problem. And I think when you layer on that emotional aspect, again, if you pay close attention to the way people say things, if you're not on a video chat or a Zoom and you're listening to the tonality, and you can start to hear the weight, the pressure, because for a lot of people, when you go through this process and you're asking the what's your situation, what does the future result look like, and if we could kind of help you fix that, if we could wave a magic wand and make it go away, what does the perfect future look like for you? You can almost hear the pressure, the weight lift off their shoulders, because for a lot of people, certainly the people that I speak to, it's the first time that someone has actually just listened to their situation and the problems that they're having. Because certainly for most owners and most owner operators and small business owners, and even the sales team, no one really wants to listen to your stuff, your baggage. Just having someone listen to their situation, their problem, for a lot of people, that is such a big help and a big relief. You're almost acting like a little bit of a counselor to their current situation. But that helps them get past that emotional fear, because, the what's holding them back might be, well, I don't know if it's going to work. How many times have you and I heard this over the years? Will this work for me? Because everyone thinks they're unique in their situation. But, what's holding you up? Well, I don't know if it's going to work. Well, let me tell you. And then this is where you can start that's your opener. Well, I was working with this guy called Bob. Bob, just last week, we helped set this thing up, the thing that you do, the speciality. And he had a similar situation to you. And this is where you can start to draw on the stories of the business, because you've helped many people like the person that you're speaking to. And if you just tell them a little story about how you've helped people and demonstrate, because now they're open to that more sales conversation. And then you can start to say things like, does that make sense? Yeah. And then you hear the tonality. You say, well, do you have any questions about that? You're trying to have a conversation about that situation. All these fears, the what's holding you back, type questions. It's not something you're going to ask once. This is, well, we've got this 9-point framework. You're going to cycle through this part of the conversation and almost in an infinite loop. And this part of the process takes as long as it takes. Does it, the kind of the what's holding you back, does it make sense when you've kind of demonstrated that, hey, you're not unique. We've helped people like this before get past these obstacles. What else is holding you back? What do you want to do next? And by asking the same question, maybe reworded in a slightly different way, they're going to tell you what the next problem is. Because the things that are holding them back, if you don't deal with them now, when you try and do the forced sale approach and say, well, we've got this super ding dong widgets and it's only blah, blah, blah a month and we can get in there, and that's when you get all these pain problems, the things that are holding them back now. You get them as objections. Oh, well, I need to speak to a partner. Well, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work in my industry. All the usual objectives that you hear, you're dealing with them as almost like a counselor. So, well, why didn't you do something about it? And again, you've still not presented your product, your pitch, your solution. You're just saying, well, what's stopping you from fixing this problem? Because, maybe there's similar products and services around what you do. Maybe you're the best choice for them, maybe you're not the best choice for them, and you're trying to figure this out. You're trying to be that helpful advocate. What's holding you back? This is the pain point. Point number 6 on our little diagram that we're kind of working through here, and we're trying to figure out if we could fix that for you, what would the situation look like? And you keep looping through that, because now you get them to pose their objections as a question to you. Well, what about this feature? What about this thing? And what about the pricing? And can we do something about this? And rather than have those, now they're joining you in helping them find the solution, as opposed to you having to overcome their objections. And I can spend a long time going through, and the magic question I like to do is, what do you want to do next? And then and just stay quiet. They're going to ask another question. Well, what do you think next? If we could do this thing, what do you want to do next? Does that make sense? And it's just this constant loop that allows them to keep posing all the traditional objections as a question. And then you can have a conversation about the thing that they're worried about and make sure that they fully understand and are reassured that you're just not trying to make the sale. You're trying to make sure that what you do is genuinely a right fit. Does that kind of make sense, Jake?
Yeah, it does.
That's one of the most important parts of this whole process, is to let the conversation be kind of progress naturally from their point of view, but you're just nudging it along in a direction.
Yeah, and I want to throw a little monkey wrench in this, because a thought that's coming to my mind is, how about when you're working with a client or a prospective client and you know that your service is the right opportunity for them? It's exactly what they need. You don't want to manipulate them. You don't want to trick them into purchasing your, whatever it may be that you're selling, but they just seem to not recognize it. For whatever reason, they have the obstacles, they have the pain points, whatever it may be, they're stepping back and saying, not for me. And you're looking at it and clearly seeing this is for them.
You've got to paint the picture that lets them see it. So this is why it's what's holding you back. Well, I'm not sure. Come on, get specific. What's the real problem? What's holding you back? Because this is where, if you've been doing this for a long period of time, you've gone through that loop and they're just still not moving. They're still firm on the question of not making any sort of commitments. So what's the real deal here? And this is where you can kind of, lean into the phone and kind of whisper, say, look, just between you and me, we've already established that we can fix this problem for you. Would that be fair? I said, but something's still bothering you. What's the real reason? And I think when you phrase that, because you've gone through all the usual objections that you might hear, day in, day out, but if you say, look, what's the real reason? Just between you and me, because if I can help you make a decision, whether it's a yes or a no, surely that's better, because I'm not trying to sell you something for the sake of selling it. I know that we can help you, but let's just make a decision here. Is it a yes or a no? Or if it's a maybe, let me know either way. But is it a yes or a no? And if it's a no, just let me know so I can learn for the future. And I think if you ask them for, again, in doing it in that context, you're kind of asking them for help, and more people are probably more inclined, help me out here.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
What's the real reason?
And that takes us to the step number 8 that we've been talking about, which I think we've been talking about it, but we haven't mentioned it for the audience. So number 8 is, are you 100% certain? And there's this 100% that's in there that I think is really a trigger word. So we've been talking about it a little bit, but as we get to step 8 and we talk about this 100% certain, how does this relate back to what you were just saying?
Yeah, because this is the point where we're going from all the, I suppose, the objection handling posed as questions from them. That they're kind of, you're asking them to ask you questions. And then 99% of the way, there's something niggling holding them back, and maybe they've said a tentative yes. And then you're saying, look, are you 100% sure that you want to go ahead with this? And it just allows them to take a step back. And
now, if they're only 99% sure, then we circle back through the loop, right? We figure out, okay, where did we miss? What's your hesitation? What haven't we responded to? And get them to that 100%. Because if they go into a relationship with you, and I'm talking business relationship here, and they're not at 100%, I mean, the downfall is
contracts that they're locked into something that they're not. They weren't 100% certain about before at the outset. And this is where your refund rates go up if you've got that kind of cooling off period. So if you can bring those down. So, yeah, I mean, it allows you and it allows them to take a step back and say, look, are you 100% certain? Are you absolutely sure that this is the right thing to do? And because, again, if you're at sales and you're on commission, then you don't want to get a clawback. There's a good reason for that. So your refund rates are going to go down. And again, if you're posing this from the point of view, look, you're trying to be helpful. And again, listen to the tone. Just because they said yes, if they said, yes, kind of like Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, that really quavery voice. Okay. Are they saying yes just to get you off the phone? And if you're doing this from, like, I'm generally trying to help them make a decision, yes or no decision, not just a yes decision. And as you go through this process, you're going to the calls are going to drop off at various points along the way. But if you get all the way to this point, you're all the way to the finish line. But what you want to do is you don't want to drag them across the finish line. You want them to willingly step over. And I think that's the difference between having a good sales process that is not spammy, not sleazy, not weird. Your refund rates are going to go down under clawback. All the things that you're worried about to make the sale. That you have this ethical standards that, look, I want to make sure that this is right for you as well. Let's figure out. I can just hear it in the tone of your voice. Is there something holding you back? Is there something else that we've not mentioned? Because I want to make sure that what we do is right for you, because we can only do our best work when you're, again, there's the word again, when you're 100% involved in us allowing us to help you. So there's something else there, isn't there? Again, it's always about the questions. If you're doing, while I appreciate that I'm doing most of the talking here today, Jay, it's all about the questions and not doing the majority of the talking.
Well, and that's the big takeaway from this episode, right? It's all about the questions. If you go through the 9 perfect strategy steps, you're going to see that every one of them revolves around questions and helping the other person and yourself to identify if you're a good fit. And that takes us all the way to number 9, which is suggest. What do you think we should do next? And we've just got a minute left, but what do you think? Suggest, what do you think we should do next? What's the importance of that?
Again, it's that commitment. It's you're allowing them to step across the finish line, as opposed to you saying, well, here's what we're going to do next. No, that's the bit after. That's the step number 9, after they've given the commitments. But it's just allowing them, again, it gives them that opportunity to step back. They might have the Columbo moment, as I call it, just one more question.
Yeah.
It's that, it just allows them to take a step back. They're almost there. They're just not quite ready to step across. And, they've got one foot in the air, about to step over. And just one more thing. Well, what do you think we should do next? What do you want to do next?
How do you envision this relationship proceeding?
Yeah, it's just, what do you want to do next? They said, well, I think we should go ahead. And when you hear that, you can hear the confidence in their voice, because you've done everything that you're supposed to do. You've had the conversation, you've built the rapport, you've explained the reality, you've painted the picture of a certain future for them if you can fix their problem. And you're answering all their questions as opposed to handling objections. And that's a big shift for most people. And then at the end of it, you're saying, what do you want to do? Do you think this is the right thing? I know that we can help you. I'm there, dude. Do you want to join me in allowing us to help you? Yes. And you can just hear that confidence. You can almost imagine them sitting up straighter, the shoulders are back, their heads up high. They've made a confident decision that they are 100% certain that this is the right thing for them to do at this moment. And that makes me feel good because I've not just made them a sale, I've helped them make a decision that will improve their current situation. And I think when you have that perspective, it makes the whole process of whatever you're doing so much better. It's now an enjoyable experience instead of, like we were saying earlier, trying to flog that dead horse.
And I think that's such a key thing that we're talking about here is making the experience better. And I know that we can go into a whole bunch more about this, and we'll include these 9 steps on the show notes for this page so that the listeners can go back and kind of review them and get an idea of the direction that they need to go in order to build these relationships. As for you and I, Phil, we are going to shift gears now. We're going to do Learning from Leaders, my favorite section of the podcast, where I hit you with a couple of questions to learn a little bit more on a personal level about you. And we're going to start with the first question, which is, what are you currently reading? What's the book on your Kindle or bedside table?
You might laugh, but the actual current Kindle book is it's called Tier 1. And it's just a novel. I like to read a lot for pleasure, and I actually get a lot of ideas and inspiration from science fiction, science fantasy authors, because these guys and girls that write these types of books, they are literally writing an imaginary world, an imaginary future. If you imagine like Star Trek in the 60s, we take that was revolutionary.
Right.
You know, that future. So, I mean, things like tricorders these days, these are becoming a reality because someone thought that stuff up in the 50s and 60s. So it allows me to explore my imagination. So I do a lot of reading on that regard. But I guess that you weren't asking me about...
Actually, that's perfectly fine because, I do a lot of kind of pleasure reading as well. And I agree with you that I get a ton of business ideas. A lot of my best ideas come from kind of expanding outside of my normal niche.
You've got that flexibility to stretch your creativity. I mean, I like reading an author called Terry Pratchett. He's a comedy writer. And he basically has this kind of magical science fantasy world. But he basically talks about things that we would experience in everyday life. And there's lots of movie quotes. I'm a big movie fan. There's lots of movie quotes in there. But he paints this world through just an alternative viewpoint that puts a very different slant on things. And again, it just allows you to stretch your imagination and just think of things from different perspectives. And I think that is a very creative way to be open-minded. And I think that's one thing that I know I am. I'm always trying to be open-minded and, with new information, reevaluate situations, and I think that reading does help me. To give a business book, I'm really enjoying, he's actually a good friend as well, Niche Down by Christopher Lochhead. Very good book if you want to kind of figure out how to become an expert in a world where a lot of people are saying that they're an expert in something. How do you genuinely become the expert by niching down, depends on where you're in the world, but just how to be recognized as an expert by focusing on your unique speciality. It's a really good read.
Oh, very nice. All right, our next question, your leadership superpower.
My leadership superpower is, and I took the very handy test that you took.
Yeah, the superpower assessment on the website.
It was new to me. So on your website, Jake, it was a problem-solving leader is what I am.
Well, and it sounds to me like you're a problem-solving leader as we go through kind of this framework, because you look at, the questions that you're asking are really about identifying the problem so that you can identify the solution. So, I mean, I see a lot of that just in the conversation that we've been having.
Well, I think it's also good. I mean, if we take the sales out the equation just for a moment, this is just a really good framework to have a damn good conversation. If you remember the days, way back when, there was phrases touted around like he's a good conversationalist, and that all revolves around asking questions. Tell me more about. Oh, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. And it's that conversationalist attitude that I'm trying to bring, because as you probably gather, I'm a bit of a chatty guy. I like having conversations, We can take that philosophy and put it into the context of sales, and it's all about asking questions and being interested. And then you become interesting. As we said earlier, it's like that other person, they're being probably listened to about their problem, the thing that keeps them up at night. For the first time, somebody's actually paying attention to them and trying to help them. And that makes you a fabulous person. I think it's a skill that we should all try and develop. Again, just ask questions and be interested in the other person.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And before we let you go today, and our time's running a little bit short, please tell us how we can find out more about you, and then maybe leave us with the last bit of mantra or quote that you live by.
Sure. If you want to reach out to me, we've got a downloadable version of this formula that we've just been going through. There's some scripts and how I would phrase it. And to be fair, I'm very open, as you can probably gather, to talking about this. So if you want to hop on a call and kind of talk about any of this, I'm very happy to do that for you and your audience. If you want to go to unhustled.com, so that's like hustle with an un on the front and a D on the end, unhustled .com/ML.
Perfect. And we're going to link that up on the show notes, and then we'll send them over there and they can get that, the 9 framework that we kind of discussed. And I think it'll be very beneficial. Phil, the time today has flown by. I look at our clock and we've gone a little bit over, but I appreciate you for being with us and sharing your expertise with the Modern Leadership audience.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. I think you asked me for a motivational quote just a moment ago. I think the one thing I like, comes from my primary business, which is in the financial trading. There was a guy called W.D. Gann, and he was a chartist and investor. But he had and I'm paraphrasing because it's like old English versus modern English, but it was always be prepared to change your mind was kind of the quotes. And I've kind of added with new information. So when you learn something new, always be prepared to change your mind. And that comes back to that philosophy of being open, asking questions, and, just be prepared to not be stuck in that mode of, okay, well, I was wrong. Now I've got new information. I know that. So always be prepared to change your mind with new information.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And thank you again for joining us on this episode. All right, my friends, and a big thanks to Phil for being this week's Modern Leadership guest expert. It's so great to catch up with Phil, and what a funny guy, right? I mean, great attitude about life and just a great storyteller. And I love this idea that his job is to take the underpaid and the overworked and help them to free up time and focus on their offer and find their most fabulous client. I mean, isn't that what we all want to do? Don't we all feel like we're a little bit underpaid and a lot overworked? And don't we want to create this better life, this better lifestyle, this more balance, more time for our family and for our friends, for our recreation and all the fun stuff that we're doing? Isn't that our goal? And so I love this conversation with Phil. Of course, everything that we talked about on this episode can be found at jakeacarlson.com/ML109, episode 109. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life, and of course, stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.